What's up, everyone? Welcome. We are live right now on CannaBuzz, and if you're joining us on YouTube, Spotify, or the podcast feed, thank you so much for joining us. We have a great episode for you today. This is another one for the growers. We've got Variant on the show. We're going to be talking about variant mutant plants, which is a really interesting subject that we've got that JR put together today. So we're going to be talking about if you've ever seen plants with different kinds of leaves, we're going to be talking about leaf variegation and all sorts of different interesting things. I think the Australian bastard and freak show and duck's foot, all sorts of things are mentioned in these questions. So it's going to be an interesting conversation. But before we get too far into it, we need to make a couple shout outs, and I'm going to make it quick because I've got a upset baby in the background. Actually, I'll just throw it over to JR and he can do the shout outs.
Excellent. We want to thank Tanazi from sacred3mushrooms.com, also tanazigardens.com. Tanazi has been a big supporter of the show for a long, long time. And he provides wonderful services in mushroom kits, genetics, and other various variables. So everything you could possibly need to be successful at home, you can get at tanazigardens.com. And also, we want to shout out to Lost Coast Plant Therapy. Dirk has been a supporter of this show, and I'm not sure that he supports many other, or if any other shows. And so that speaks a lot to the volume of his support, and we appreciate the Lost Coast family tremendously for helping us keep this message going and educating folks such as yourself. And I'll do the shout outs for Secret Selections. One of the ones I wanted to talk about, secretselections.io is Brad's site. And he's got that Zlushies number 7. And if you go onto my feed, you can take a look at how gorgeous that is. And dude recently came by and visited my spot. And out of everything in the room, that was his favorite profile. It's fruity. Definitely kind of a maraschino grape and cherry type vibe. Very, very, very intoxicating. So check out the Zlushies number 7 at secretselections.io. And I wanted to shout out tikiseeds.com. Tiki's having his Save Christmas, and you'll be getting some free packs and some free gear. So check out tikiseeds.com for his Christmas promotion. And I just wanted to shout out Tiki for his Black Friday sale that he did at his cuts, tikicuts.com. He had some tremendous genetics on there that he gave people some really, really affordable access to. So if you had saved your pennies, you really did well with the offerings that Tiki had. So shout out to Tiki Madman. And then I'm going to do a little shameless plug for myself. I just rebuilt tokensroots.com from the ground up. I've got 4 products that I'm offering there. And the seasonal product is a cough syrup that's made with raw local honey, lemon, ginger, and garlic. And it's been fermented, and it's way better tasting than Robitussin. And you mix that with the Mullen drops, and you don't need pharmaceuticals. I guarantee it.
Awesome. Well, let's get into our guest today. We're very fortunate to have Variant from Variant's Corner. He specializes in mutant cannabis genetics, and we're excited to get into this subject. A lot of us, most of us don't know too much about it and probably haven't grown some of these, weird plants that we've seen on Instagram or whatever. So I'm excited to get into it. Thanks for joining us today, Variant.
Yeah, no worries. I'm happy to be here. I'm pretty excited to talk about them and share them. There's a whole world out there, and once you dive into them, it really is one of those rabbit holes that just keeps going. You learn more, and you realize you know less.
Well, yeah, I think it's interesting because when we find our little niches, it just opens up what we felt like was something now, and it just becomes this expansive global community. You've got people in your community, I imagine, from all over planet Earth.
So that's a big part of it that I've found as well. Is there's certainly vendors that you can actually buy straight from in Europe, but very hard to get in the U.S. at this point. can't necessarily ship, and they're a lot stricter in many cases in those environments there. But as well as Australia, uh, another place where they're very popular and or originate to some degree. But um, you have ones like the pardon, Australian bastard cannabis, which obviously from there, and it's probably one a bit more different. We'll talk about it kind of separate because it is one that's kind of more of a naturally occurring, whereas the others that I'm aware of, uh, and again, always learning and finding more. So, but are more bred and selected for, or possibly created. So,
So we always ask our guests when they come on the show how they fell in love with the plant and how the plant has helped get them where they are today.
well, I was in my 20s, more or less, when I really uh, found a passion for it. I was kind of a climbing bum, and the guy that taught me how to grow basically also did boat deliveries. So I ended up watching his grow for extended periods and got a reputation for being a good garden sitter, so to speak. So I ended up watching several in the area and learned quite a bit and got to see quite a bit by doing that. So that was, you know, been prohibition times. So it was very interesting, but a good opportunity. And it's, I find it interesting a little bit that I'm still doing a lot of those same habits today. Not a lot has changed. While I've veered away from several of them, some of them I found myself right back to. And, one of them being the, basic way that I clone, which is, the basic thing that we were doing, but we were doing it then too. So anyhow, as far as that basically was the opportunity that really showed me that not only did it help me get and do what I wanted to do at the time, which was climbing and having free time, but in hindsight, I didn't realize how much it was actually helping me medically, probably, and just generally being, because I took a hiatus for 10 years following that. And in hindsight, now that I've been, using the plant again for, at least that long and longer, um, I can look back and reflect. And I definitely think that having it in my life has been more beneficial for me, just mentally, health wise. Um, I have my med card. I've maintained my med card since that's been a thing. So,
Yeah, shout out to that. Having supporting your state medical program is very important. It gives us a little extra leverage, and it also gives you a little extra protection legality.
absolutely, and it's worth having. I mean, for so many reasons, like the support as well as it just opens doors and it gives you a little peace of mind knowing that at least you have that, showing that you're trying to do things the right way.
So, for those that are new to this concept, I'd love for you to kind of introduce us to what is a cannabis mutant plant. And then I'm also interested in what drew you into working with them and kind of focusing on those like phenotypes. And yeah, let's start there.
Sure. Well, I kind of stumbled across them really. Um, I didn't have any idea it was even a thing until it was a subterfuge, possibly type project that was, I think, a CSI and riot oriented project, if I remember right. Anyway, stumbled across it somewhere in that realm, and which opened up the door to finding Ben Chicken, and who is really, really been kind of like the source, and he has a Discord. And if any of you are on Discord, that's worth checking out because the community there is amazing, and it's just such a source of fountain of information. Uh, but but yeah, that was originally an ABC and I believe Freak Show type cross that they were working on, and I immediately, of course, ordered some of those, and also got immediately in touch with Ben Chicken in that Discord and started trying to and ordered, and got a hold of some of Ben Chicken's gear, and have been working with it since. I'm a few generations in on some of the stuff I've gotten from him, and he also has gifted me projects along the way, and uh, it's been awesome. He's definitely laid some serious foundation work into the ABC variety, and deserves some notoriety
What
for
was his
sure.
name again?
Ben Chicken.
Ben
Uh,
Chicken.
yeah,
Sweet.
yeah.
And so now, some of the iconic kind of varieties that we know about are like the Freak Show and the Australian Bastard Cannabis, Duckfoot. But there's also like other categories of just variegation and stuff like that. So can you kind of lay down the foundation of what kind of the mutant categories are?
Sure. So another one that's pretty standalone is the Freak Show, and it actually has a few ranges. So we'll talk more about that too. But like you're on the overcap, and I keep diving into these specifics. Sorry, I'm super nervous a little bit. I don't do a whole lot of this
Don't
kind
worry,
of
you're doing great, man.
meetings.
We're just here to burn down and
Yeah,
have a good time.
but yeah. So the Freak Show, Doctor Freak, originated, and there's various versions of it that range from being just like essentially a very normal looking leaf. I don't know if these are going to show up very well, but like fairly normal, but just with very extended petioles, but still shoots out a similar pattern, counts up leaflets as it matures and then counts down as it flowers. Same thing, only instead of starting off from very original, you know, petiole, it'll shoot out the petiole, and then from there, each leaflet gets an extended petiole. And that would be kind of like the most mild version of like a Freak Show, to where it goes from pinnate all the way to palmate, where it'll be more
Oh,
like
I see,
maybe
like a fern.
exactly, and maybe even to where you'll start losing side leaves and truly get, to where it'll be just a single, you know, even more fern like. But that's basically the spectrum of Freak Show. So it's kind of a range. So you may see something labeled Freak Show, and it may not be that extreme fern. It may be some measure in between that. And um, knowing that it's there, though, is a good hint that if you were to try to select for it or breed for it, you should, in theory, potentially be able to get there. But that path may be long. But so
Yeah, because these mutations are like the outliers. These are not the predictable genetics.
well, for sure, they're recessive, so they're going to at least take a few generations even to break out, and that's what I'm saying. As far as like, well, this one even just when it starts expressing starts very mild, and then can range all the way up to that fern shape. The other ones that you talked about, the duckfoot, where there's swag as well. They're kind of very similar, both very webbed. Um, they and that, as far as I'm understanding it as well, is a bit of a range where it'll go from being just webbed and still have multiple leaflets that are just webbed very as much at the root or at the base of the leaf, and still make individual fingers eventually. To the other end of the spectrum where it starts being truly swag, where it's very webbed all the way up and putting out maybe just little tips, three or maybe even one, or even being truly lanceolate, where it's just one single leaflet all the way start to finish. And in theory, that's possibly a range that can be achieved once you start seeing it in that line. But then there's also just mutant genetics and the mutant varieties. Kind of is a very wide net. Some of
Right.
them, are also just natural occurring selections, or maybe just more obscure land races that aren't distributed or selected for, or just aren't seen
Yeah, I was
as
gonna ask
much.
that. I was gonna ask that because, like, I was just kind of curious. Is there like, are there naturally occurring fields of like Freak Show and or whatever it is? I know people are growing them now because I think I've seen it online or whatever. But just kind of curious. Yeah, do you think these were, because you could, it makes, it's nature, right? You could have some sort of region that a plant evolved to be the freak show for whatever, you know, evolutionary drivers in that particular region or whatever you want to call it. Um, or do you think it's just like, no, it's just a random like mutant variation that came out?
No, that's a good question. They're kind of specific to some of them. They very much have been selected for and worked towards. So no, I don't think you'll have seen or would have seen a field necessarily of some of these extreme, mutations or representations. Um, but had it popped up here and there, yeah, very very likely. It just wasn't the most effective option for the area that didn't progress. But Freak Show in particular was one that was selected for, as I understand it, and created. Doctor Freak, I think, who's credited with that one. Even like the Dunn, I got a freak from Dunn at the DGC Cup. He had a whole bunch of freak shows, and freak show is kind of a specific mutation that we just kind of talked about, where it's that palmate to fern, pinnate sort of leaf shape.
So most of that we see in images that are like really dramatic, those are the same pheno that's being passed around from folk to folk.
As far as I understand it, for the most part, yeah, it's been kind of worked with and passed around. Um, the I've also just more recently kind of been hearing that it's not, maybe certainly not the extreme, but like some of the earlier signs of just the deep serrations or whatever may just be somewhat an outlying, super ultra rare mutation that can pop up in some of uh, those, I believe it was banana or whatever lines that it originated in. But
That kind of
um,
leads me to the kind of our next section is the actual flowering of these plants. And so, like CBD varieties, these hemp varieties, a lot of them have a pretty similar profile. Would you say that's kind of true with these mutants, or does it just completely depend on if you're looking at variegation versus actual morphology mutation?
uh, so the to some degree, yeah, they, and I have, somewhat limited experience. What I've grown is what I've been able to experience as far as being able to answer this question. So, um, but it's my understanding that, yeah, the some of the that while the few freaks that I've grown out have had definitely different characteristics to them. One's very berry, one's been very fruity. Um, uh, I haven't gotten too much on the earthy side yet in them, but I've again only grown a couple of them out. I just finished flowering the one out I got from the cup there, and it was the very berry one. The one I've been working with that I had gotten from Bringfax, that was a bit milder expression as far as the leaf goes, was very like great, and it has an interesting. When it's growing, you touch it, it smells like big league chew, just super great big league chew. Um, as it finishes, it starts to smell like baby diapers. And then as it sits in the jar, it kind of can, so far this round, it's been continuing to smell more like the baby diapers, but I expect that sweet smell to come back again once it kind of,
Mellows
just has,
out, get some of
yeah,
those
yeah,
volatiles off.
So,
totally.
Interesting.
so in your experience, and then I guess from what you've seen out in the industry and whatnot, are there? Do you think there's, besides the novelty of these just looking like cool plants or just different plants from what we're, used to, do they have like redeeming qualities from a like a flower or taste perspective or whatever? Because you know like I guess what I'm alluding to is like there's a niche for just like cool weird stuff to grow, but there's also, this industry is so economically driven in terms of what consumers are going to want at the store or whatever it is. So do you see that there's like demand for the flower or whatever? I'm just kind of curious because I've never actually, like you were saying, I've never consumed these, so I have no idea what they're like.
Yeah, no, there is, and while that one I was describing has the sweet end of it, there's another aspect or another range of mutants that I've also been. So I've kind of been spending most of my time, and what I'll be able to speak the best to will be the Australian bastard cannabis lines. Well, I have grown a few of the freaks, and I'm working with them a bit as well. Uh, I'm just kind of just starting down that path a little bit, and they've been more of the kind of the side project. So the focus being, like I said, both the ABC, but also I've been working a lot with single leaf and swag varieties, which swag, I'm pretty sure at some point somewhere we'll be able to find that it was written like it's some along the lines of smooth webbed, smooth leaf ed. So sorry, as an acronym, but smooth webbed uh, Afghani genome or something like that. It's probably similar, like the SAGE acronym, something along those lines. And I may have just done that to try to remember it myself, but basically swag is that way. Swag is smooth on the edge, smooth edge, uh, and generally webbed like a duck. And that's kind of one of the differentiating factors for the most part between the duck lines and the swag is that smooth profile. And a lot more frequently you find it seems to crinkle, which is another mutation. So might be worth talking about some of that too.
Yeah, so gotta break down
Separate.
some of those because I mean, one people are most are knowledgeable about is variegation, but other than
Totally.
variegation, what are some of the other mutant points that people are looking at?
Sure. No, variegation's probably the one you'll see the most and the one you'll see a splash of come and go. And that can be color. Uh, Anything from like, uh, white on green is the most obvious one that catches the eye the fastest. White, yellow on green, which, also jumps out. And those are probably the more common ones, but it can also do pink as well, as I understand it. And that I haven't seen as much in the leaves as you see in more of the flower itself, all the way down to being albino or completely white. And those just don't function. So those don't get grown much. Those require being grafted and all sorts of just hobbyist level care to try to make happen. Um, and even the variegation generally doesn't like the light as much. So unless your situation is a low light situation or something you're trying to cater to, variegation in a variegated plant might lend itself to that. But otherwise, in a general grow where people are cranking lights up and going for broke, variegation is going to struggle. And usually what will happen is it's rarely stable. So usually the green will outperform anything that's variegated on the plant and it'll just be back to green again. It's pretty rare to find one that is start to finish consistently variegated. That's pretty ultra rare. There's a company called Terpes who is a European company. It's hard to get their gear in the US. I think Seedsman might have some of it, but but it's not going to be the latest stuff. Unfortunately, it's just really hard to get their gear in the US. But that's probably the most prolific variegated lines that I've seen, or person working with them. But still, as I understand it, you have to have reasonable expectations in a pack that it's still not a guarantee. It's still
Sure. And so, what are some of the other mutant characteristics besides that people are looking for?
Sure. So recently, or not recently, a couple of years ago now, I got some interesting gear to work with from Jesse at Mothership Labs. And in that stuff, I've been finding a range of mutations, and I'm talking about them because of the range that I've seen within this one batch, where you'll see petiolus. So a leaf will just start right from the stem. There won't be any petiole at all coming off the stem, which really isn't all that functional. It looks neat. It makes it look very basil-like. So it definitely camouflage. It would definitely, not stand out. You could hide it in an herb garden very easily. But because it curls like that, it also curls around the bud and tends to choke off the bud sites. So it's not incredibly functional for production. Um, the other one that I saw in that same thing is crinkle. Crinkle can show up in lots of other mutants as well, but that'll be where it almost looks like the leaf is dried out, kind of as the best way I think I could describe it, where or crinkled or a piece of paper that's been wadded up and then opened back up and laid out, sort of. Um, and that'll present in the range of leaf shapes. So it's not real exclusive. It uh, is one that has been prevalent in the stuff I've been working with from him, as well as the petiolus. So I've happened to really select away from it to find things that are functional. I've also really been finding a bunch of basically everything's been smooth edge. Uh, I've found very little that looked truly normal in progression. Most of it has been swag, smooth edge, webbed with little tips, some of them being very little. And I found also some lanceolate in there. And that's what I've really been hunting for is the lanceolate. But unfortunately, that also seems to be very tied to some of the intersex traits that I found. And so
Okay.
breeding away from that as well. Or,
So let me jump in
sorry.
with a question on the breeding side of things. So,
Yeah.
like, are these mutant traits, if you will, are they like are people kind of coming across them, or are they kind of triggering them in plants that they're already growing, and then once they do trigger them or somehow those traits present themselves, is it how easy or difficult is it to kind of stabilize those traits so that eventually kind of have the line that's like, this is the freak show or whatever, your new strain is?
Um, well, so far the ones that I've worked with, they uh, breed like recessive. So it takes, introducing it and then introducing it again before you start to bring it out in a matching pair, sort of, or however you want to describe it. But basically, it's not until the F2 that you're going to start seeing, you know, 25% and like any reasonable amount to start really selecting and locking in a trait. So I personally have been starting that way. I've been starting with ones that I've liked, um, flavor wise. Like I've been working with sage. I've been working with goof off, which is one that like tangy oriented one that I've had for a while in my garden. Um, Trying to think what else I've. But anyway, uh, it takes a generation or two just to get a shape started, let alone try to hold on to any sort of other profile in it that you're hoping to keep. What I've found so far, circling back to the again one that I've worked with, and I can speak to the most is the stuff I got from Jesse, where it seems like very humulaline and terpenoline strong. A lot of it's been there's a very strong profile especially in the single leaf, which is what I've been again trying to really focus on because there's not a lot of that out there. A lot of people have seen the freak show and that kind of thing, but the true single leaf, lanceolate, and even some of the swag that I'm seeing is very long and not the traditional fat, wide palm shape. Or not palm, I say palm like hand shaped palm uh, shape, sort of. But to answer your question, it takes generations. And so if it's something you want to work towards, you're better off, or if you see a shape you like, trying to track down who's working with it, get a hold of it, and start hopefully from where they're at, because it can be a challenge depending on what it is. Some of it definitely breeds stronger and holds true. The So far, I'm seeing super consistent results with the Australian bastard stuff, which has a pretty wide range of leaf shapes. I don't know if
Yeah,
that's gonna.
I love the way these things look. They look like, I don't know what. When you see them online, they look like, I don't like a basil slash tomato plant or something like that. I don't know. It's just like such an interesting looking plant. So when they So one of the topics that JR loves to talk about on this show is like extracts. So I'm
Mhm.
curious, do these like squish better or whatever it is because they have like better leaf service or different leaf service versus a traditional bud?
That's a good point. There's as far as, and it kind of answers the commercial side of things too, because that definitely ties into directly, those two things together. So of the mutants out there, most of them are going to fall into more of a hobby, fun category than anything. Um, they certainly will get the job done. They're my daily smoke. They're I some of the normies that are still in my garden are only because they've been my favorites for a long time, like the Dupop that I mentioned. Otherwise, I think this last round, it was the only one in there that wasn't the carrier that was just being grown for its own sake. But otherwise, everything else is mutants, chasing mutants.
Yeah, I one of
Yeah,
my favorite strains was the OGKB, the Platinum Girl Scout cookies, and it grew very strange. Did not have a lot of lateral branching. Did not have a lot of growth. Threw out a ton of the three leaf, the petiole. I always call them duck foot type stuff. And
yeah.
I think it also was smooth leaf. But it was fire. I mean, it grew these tiny little nuggets, but it was on another level. It was really good. That was probably one of my favorite. So when you're trying to kind of work these lines and you're selecting, it's pretty much just a visual thing, right? You're going straight off the visuals, right?
That is part of what makes it fun. Is you're able to do if you're wanting to get into growing mutants to actually be able to select for them and grow and maybe do some of your own breeding and make your own seeds and that kind of thing. The fun part about it is you're making these selections in the first you know handful of nodes. So nothing has, a lot of your selections are done in the veg stage. You don't have to take things all the way through to fruition if your first selection is for shape. Um, so that makes things go a little faster in that you can grow more and look through more without having to wait as long. You turn the generations faster, so to speak, or at least the search, the pheno hunt, if you will, faster. Um, but there are ones that are also more commercial oriented. I think of all of those, the Australian bastard cannabis one is probably the one that's going to stand out the most. It, of the ones I've grown, it definitely throws out the most highest yielding ones. The other thing that's super interesting with it is it throws super long petioles and teeny tiny leaves. So because of the small leaf surface, it does take a little bit longer to get going at the first node or two until it gets enough of those little leaves out there to get the job done. But once it does, boy, so it may not catch that second gear, but as soon as it hits that third gear, they just take off. And and yeah, the other thing about that is it's going to be hard to see, but super long petioles on them make it super easy to trim. So they're just like and you almost don't. Here, I realize it's going to be the opposite for JR with his climate, but here where it's super dry, I don't even hardly trim them. There are no fan leaves really to take off.
Yeah, that looks
To
like a
start with.
tomato plant basically but just with the buds where the tomatoes are. That's just so interesting.
It's
Yeah,
also
totally.
I've seen also where people will have them like literally on their front porch, and you would not even know it's a cannabis plant in the
Well, and
traditional terms.
the leaf behind me is an Australian bastard cannabis leaf that's in kind of senescence, sort of. This is shortly before harvest of one, and it's one that I didn't notice any variegation while it was growing, but it almost looks like it's the way it split the color there, like it's hinting at it, had something like that happening or going on. But but yeah, so and the little tiny sort of sugar leaves, if you will, that do form are just so small they're almost not worth pulling out. Like they're just in there. They're yeah. And if you were to hand somebody a bud, that's probably the only way they'll be able to figure out that it's ABC and not some regular.
Anything else? Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I smoked
So
some of your flower at the cup, and I didn't notice it being any different than any other cannabis. I mean, it was great.
yeah, no, it's and that's the one that seems to have. So of the ones I've grown, the ABC also seems to be willing to take on more profiles more willingly. Um, the Again, the single leaf stuff has been pretty narrow. There's been some great mango menthols coming out of that, and just some super eye-watering menthol and mango separately on the single leaf. And then the freak show stuff that I've grown, like I said so far, has been very berry. But to answer that underlying, do they have that almost, there is like a mothbally, or maybe not the best description, but there's something that was similar between them in the back end that would make me say, oh, that's maybe a freak show trait. Just like so far with this single leaf, I'm finding that same mango menthol being just so hard to get away from, and I've hit it with some very opposing profiles that it still came across. It still just
Yeah.
ran them over, and yeah.
So I
Yeah.
want to double click on kind of your advice for breeders or people that want to kind of, because let's say I've got like a favorite strain or types of strains. We've been getting some great seeds from Tangled Roots, sent us some strains earlier or seeds earlier this year. So we've got like CBD, and we've got Huckleberry Hill Farms and whatever. And what if I'm like a mad scientist and I'm like, I want to introduce these weird traits into what they've got and come out with something cool? So I
Yeah.
need a couple tips. I need, a, where do I get the mutant genetics from? Where do I get those
Sure.
from? And then what are the like breeding tips to make sure that I'm producing something that'll be interesting or worthwhile?
Sure. Um, it'll definitely going to take some time. It's going to take a couple generations to know you're getting into something that's going to be a project. Um, but we love this plant, so it's a project of love, right? The but as far as where well, let's back up. Which ones to start with? I think would be a good start, and ABC I think is the easiest to see happening and quickest to get there. And then second in line would probably be tied with the freak show and the single leaf stuff. Um, the single leaf being the problem where the profile seems to be pretty dominant. So if you like those profiles that I mentioned, then it'd be a great, or it could complement, then that would be a great start. But otherwise, I'd veer away from maybe some of the single leaf and look at, the ABC. And because again, it seems to be, its underlying profile so far seems to be kind of lime, uh, light citrus. I've gotten some peppery backgrounds out of it. Um, what else have I seen? And by peppery, I mean like kind of like that, like a rye is the whiskey sort of peppery finish. Um, that, that one was one I really enjoyed. That was the barrel jelly. Uh, and that's why it's based in a lot of what I have available on my site will have barrel jelly in the background, but also so I can get you some of the ABC, but also get you in touch with um, other sources as well. The best way that I've found is Discord. Honestly, I have links on my website to get you to the Discords, either to mine or I can get you to the right Discord. Thin Chicken's Discord is really a great source for trying to source other mutants and find things like that, and or just get mutant information. Uh, so that would be the first great stopping point, and then from there you should be able to find or source just about anything you want, whether it's the single leaves like I'm working with, or freaks, or the Austrian bastard, which again I have some of, but Ben Chicken is the grandfather of, so to speak.
Yeah,
Uh,
so tell us some of the stuff that you do have available on your site. Tell us about the site and some of the projects you're working on.
sure. Um, so currently, I just have a small allotment of the ABC available from an early hunt where I source, that one I refer to as angry, because the buds definitely take on this one long, tall foxtail in the center. And I haven't had a chance to see how consistent that's going to be. I expect very foxtaily in general, but whether it's going to make that true angry looking Pinot like I found, I can't promise that. But yeah, it looks like your whole plant's flipping you off with a bunch of little fingers with these long little foxtaily buds that it produces. It's hilarious. But there tends to be two general structures so far that the ABC presents. One will be a little bit taller and stretchier. The other one's going to be a lot bushier and denser. So I've seen both. The sweet ones seem to be the denser, small ones, and the ones that tend to have more of that citrus tend so far to be more of the tall, stretchier ones. But again, this is a very small allotment that I've had the chance to actually flower out and sample that hasn't been seeded as well. So, that, don't take that for, you know, across the board profile by any means. But what I have hit it with is sage, and I'm about to, um, part of the project I'll be kicking off soon will be bringing out hopefully that 25% range in the sage uh, project. So that one will be, I probably won't release it soon. I did release a hoodoo line as well, where you should be able to see about 25% ABC in that. That one's going to be way more Kimmy profile, like earthy, at least so far that I've come across. It's because hoodoo was the Old Dominion sort of Chico.
Okay.
This was derived specifically from an Australian cut that got popular there. And this is the project Ben Chicken had gifted me. And so I had taken it another generation.
Oh,
And
cool.
Cool. I think it's cool. I like kind of what I was kind of throwing out there earlier is I like the idea of, like you were just mentioning a couple famous breeders, Old Dominion, right? Like it'd just be cool to be like get a variegated spin on, some of my favorite breeders or some of my favorite flavors or whatever it is. So I think that's really cool. I'm excited to see more of that stuff. I want to see like a really weird purple Australian bastard or whatever it is. All these different things would be really cool to see. And on that topic of seeing, where can people follow your work? Like, where can people follow you online? Your site? Oops, there you go. I think there you're back. You're back. We can see you. You were just frozen on our end, but you're all good. Let's see. I think he's back. You're back? There. I think
He keeps freezing right at the last second, too.
all good.
And the way he's looking, you can't tell if he's actually freezing or not. I was just going to ask him where he thought the rest of the industry was going to be heading in the next 5 years, because yeah, your video is it's interesting because this is such a niche thing that could really become super popular. And the next thing you know, everybody wants one, you know what I mean? It's really interesting to kind of see, where this could go, because it's such a new part of the industry.
Yeah, sorry about that. We lost you there for a second, but I was just gonna say where because I imagine you're online, right? So where can folks follow you online to see more pictures of your work or learn more about your work?
Sure. Variancecorner.com is going to be the best place to catch me. And you can, at the bottom, you'll find links to take you to Discord, which is really where I can probably show you more of what I've been working with, and or get you in touch with someone else that might have what you want. If you're wanting a specific, expression, mutation, what have you.
Nice.
Yeah, and it's worth checking out. They're fun. They do, I believe, hit a bit different too. I'd love to get some tested. I know this is probably one of JR's interests specifically as well as I and like he was alluding to with the Tiki Raid, I feel like there's something else in some of these, particularly the ABCs, and they just kind of, it'd be interesting from a medical point of view to get some of these profiles tested and just cataloged and see how they compare to the other ones that are out there. including especially the single leaf as well.
Yeah, I mean, and we didn't really talk about it much, but I think it's also an interesting idea of like if you combined the medical a medical strain like a tiki rain or maybe a CBD or maybe it's straight up CBD or something like that, and you combine it with this plant that doesn't look like a weed plant, and then you combine that with a government which seems to be for some reason going back towards criminalizing weed. If people have to worry about the weed that they're growing or something like that, I think it'd be great if there's medicinal varietals, if you will, that don't look like weed plants, and they could just be this weird tomato basil plant thing that you've got growing right under people's noses, so to speak.
Absolutely, no, for sure. The ADC would fully fit into most herb gardens, especially for 2/3 of summer before anything starts showing. Nobody will know what it is, and then once it starts showing, very few people will still know what it is. And there's definitely value there as well, just from a grow in plain sight sort of take on it. And um, the you can also catch me on if you're on the Real BBC side as well. Spend quite a bit of time posting up. I have a lot of my picks on there as well. Um, the Sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
No worries, man. Jared, do you have any final questions before we kind of wrap up the hour here? Oops.
Yeah, as you were kind of glitching out, we were talking about just the idea that, this could, where a lot of the industry is slowing or kind of tanking, this could be one aspect of the industry that could be a next thing to pop and really be something that people vibe with. What are your thoughts on the next few years of this niche of growing and breeding?
I think it's really going to catch on. I think for a few reasons, like we just alluded to, but also just because the uh, growers out there are maturing and realizing that you don't have to crank for weight. A lot of the way we do things, the way things have been looked at, has been from prohibition blinders, and some of these mutants also are just undesirable necessarily for those from with through that lens, but yet there's nothing necessarily wrong or undesirable about the plant when it comes down to it. It may still have a fantastic high or something else, but it just doesn't produce the volume. Like the ABC is going to be a little slower to get started, but especially if you have a perpetual grow going or something like that, where you have that time scale worked out. Once you make that scale or make that round, the time doesn't matter because you're now looping, and so yeah, it may take a second more to kickstart, but it's worth it. The other thing I've noticed with it is it's super resilient. Like the ABC, out of all the other reason I keep coming back to that one is people that are interested in it. It's definitely the most resilient of them that I've worked with. Um, it's it's the easiest to trim. That's I think one thing that the commercial market might catch on to is you almost don't have to trellis it because those leaves reach out and grab each other and interlock with each other, and sometimes almost become inducives to separate it when you are trying to like trellis that out for the first time and get it all the way out. Untangling it can be sometimes a chore, but because they grab hold of each other. But the upside to that is if you're scrogging or laying it out in any way, it just loves that. And it'll shoot up through that. You almost don't need a second scrog if you're one of these first people that do or double trellis, um, like like and I do. You almost don't need that second trellis because by then it's already grabbed a hold of itself enough. But when it comes time to trim, the long reaching petioles make it super easy if you're in an area where you have to. But because the leaf mass is so much less, I find I don't need to. And if I'm really trying to get that, 10-day or long cure, I can't I can't trim it all the way. I need to leave all the
Yeah.
leaves on because they're so small.
And I think, like you said, looking through that lens of production, and I think even we're starting to see openings in varieties themselves. It's not the ones, these bottleneck strain, one strain that everybody's got to have, like a cookies or whatever. There's so
Totally.
much more diversification now. And another trend I'm seeing is people are starting to open up to bringing some of these land races back into some of these gene pools. Also, some of these longer flowering sativas back into these gene pools, and a lot of the hobbyist growers and the home growers are the folks that can really perpetuate that. If you're
Totally.
locked into a economic model that requires, constant profit, those are things that you don't have the luxury to do where we do. And so I'm kind of excited to see that happen within the overall community as a whole.
And I agree. I think that's the other place where this is really has a space to grow. Is I guess then what you're saying is as people realize they don't have to produce, a lot or whatever, or have the time to grow what they want. If it takes longer, doesn't have to meet those commercial or prohibition lenses. Either one of those lenses aren't necessarily conducive to the plant being, what it wants to be or what it can offer. So, and that's the other aspect of these is I find uh, these mutants potentially are very much unexplored. There's not a lot of growing has gone into a lot of these traits and things. So I'm not going to be surprised to find that there might be underlying benefits in some of these that we just haven't looked at before because they didn't meet those lenses. And these are great examples of those extremes. I know that's not a new thought or a new, concept that what will be overlooked by just growing for commercial, you know, or prohibition needs and not, otherwise. But
Right.
yeah,
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it. Hopefully, this helps inspire other growers to check out your work and also maybe dabble in their own. Like I was saying earlier, I think it'd be really interesting to see bunch of different options there. And I think it's been really cool to see as the industry's gone, however way the industry's gone. I think it's cool that we've seen more home breeders like yourself and our friends. Like I was telling my wife, I got like a notification, and she asked me like about what I was looking at or whatever, and I was saying it's so cool that folks like Soup and JR have teamed up, and Soup's releasing Soup seeds, and they're using a cut of JR's. I was talking to JR the other day because I'm getting some like small flower from a local dispensary, and it's got cherry paloma as one of the crosses in it. And it's just crazy to
right.
me that this stuff is getting out there. It's not crazy in terms of I don't believe it. It's just so awesome. It's so awesome to see. I was like such a nerd at the grow. I was like, I know the guy that came up with that. The guy didn't give a shit when I said that, by the way. He didn't care. He just was like, okay, whatever. But
So great.
yeah, but anyways, I think it's awesome. Hopefully, you guys do keep up the great work. Thank you so much for your time, Variant. We really do appreciate you hanging out with us on your Monday evening. Thanks, JR, for putting together today's episode. Thanks to all of our sponsors and supporters and followers. Make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, JR,
Growers
growers love.
love.
Peace, everyone. Have a great rest of your week.